Moving on now to some business news, and the French business community is eagerly awaiting the announcements from President Emmanuel Macron later this Tuesday. Many of those who've been forced to close during the lockdown are hoping for some reprieve during the crucial Christmas shopping season. For more, we can speak to our business editor, Stephen Carroll. Stephen, what exactly are we expecting the President to say in terms of businesses?
Well, the final measures are due to be decided at a meeting later this morning where key ministers will be briefed on the latest health situation in the country, and we're expecting a roadmap over 3 phases that'll cover the coming weeks. The first of those phases starting on the 1st of December, a second to cover the Christmas holiday period at the end of December, and a third from the 1st of January. Now, from the 1st of December, we are expecting some restrictions to be lifted, particularly in terms of non-essential shops, which have been closed for almost a month now under the lockdown measures. They're expected to be given permission to open, and that'll be particularly important for the retail sector in this critical period for sales for many retailers. Not such good news, though, for bars and restaurants. We're not expecting any restrictions to be lifted. Of course, they have also been closed except for takeaways for almost a month now. That's bad news for the 960,000 people that work in the hospitality industry in France, many of whom have been on furlough since their businesses were forced to shut down, and others since much earlier in the year, since the first lockdown, and they've never been able to return to work. So that's going to be bad news potentially coming for them. Gyms not expected to reopen until January, according to the sports minister, although there may be an exception for sporting activities for young people. And it's unsure as well what's going to happen for cinemas, theatres and other cultural institutions, whether or not they will be allowed to open, or whether that might provide some reprieve for those businesses. Either way, we are expecting President Emmanuel Macron to give a sort of a roadmap for the coming months. That may lead some business owners to have to make some very difficult decisions about whether or not they can survive this. They have already been dealing with almost 9 months of lockdown measures, of shutdowns affecting their businesses. There could be some tough decisions ahead for them.
Indeed, Stephen, give us an idea of the state of the French economy at this stage.
So we had seen a rebound in activity between July and September as restrictions had been lifted. But according to the latest forecast in the French National Statistics Office, Insee, economic activity is down by 13% in November during this lockdown. That's not as severe a drop as we had seen earlier in the year when activity was down by around 30%. But Insee expects economic growth now to be negative for the last 3 months of the year, to the economy to shrink by 4.5%. And for the whole of 2020, the French economy will have shrunk by 9 to 10%, according to Insee's forecast. It's worth saying the French finance minister actually sees that figure of being even worse, an 11% slump in the economy. Now, the lockdown this time around, as I was saying, not as severe as the first time earlier this year, and that's because businesses like factories and building sites have been allowed to continue work, and that's being reflected in the economic survey data out there as well. The manufacturing industry not taking as hard a hit as services, because of course many service industries forced to close during this period. We are expecting there to be 900,000 jobs lost in France this year. The overall economic picture, of course, is going to have an impact on employment. There's a fairly good chance that unemployment will have to rise despite the huge help put in place by the government, the furlough scheme, supports and loans for businesses, grants in some cases as well. The government trying to support businesses as much as possible through this crisis, but the longer it goes on, the more difficult it's going to be for many of these businesses to bounce back, and that could have a huge impact on jobs. The economic scars could last years.
Okay, it sounds like quite a bleak outlook for France in any case at the current moment. Stephen, how are the markets faring this Tuesday?
Bit more optimism around on the stock markets today. European shares starting the day up. That's partly linked to optimism over a vaccine, but also particularly the travel industry seeing shares rise in early trading in Europe today. And that's after the United Kingdom saying that it could reduce its quarantine for travel to 5 days and a test after 5 days for incoming passengers. And that's proving to be good news for airlines this morning. IAG, the owner of British Airways, up by over 4% in London. Air France getting a boost as well. Ryanair, EasyJet, all seeing growth there, although the CEO of Ryanair Michael O'Leary, in typical fashion, being quite critical of the government's quarantine proposal, saying that in fact testing before arrival would be much more effective than what's being proposed by the British government. But that's the sort of things that we've expected to hear from Michael O'Leary during this crisis. More broadly, the markets trading up across Europe, as I said. It was a similar picture in Asia earlier. The Nikkei in Tokyo finishing the day up 2.5%. Shares actually hitting a 29-year high in trading earlier. Again, vaccine optimism and optimism over the transition. Progress in the United States helping investors there. Just the Shanghai Composite in Asia seeing some falls in trading.
Okay, well, I'm going to focus on the optimism there, Stephen, to finish. Thanks very much for that, Stephen Carroll there, our business editor.